Calling from a 305 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, this is R.M. Brown from the Tim Pool Research Foundation.
Oh, R.M. Brown. Well, thank you for appearing on our show on election eve.
Is that a nonprofit?
It didn't work, but you're going to be Congress is going to investigate. It's going to pass a law to investigate you shortly.
I mean, honestly, RM, it's not your fault. It was my fault I knew, like, you know, back in the day, I was much more militant. Like, I was able to will the Giants to that 2011, 2012 Super Bowl by never saying the words win or loss. And then I wore the same jersey every night before a game. So I think it was me posting that map that actually got Donald Trump over the finish line.
Ah, you blew it. Why'd you do that?
I know.
That's why I'm calling to confront you about this. This is all your fault. Unbelievable.
I know.
But yeah, no. There's some funny Tim Pool videos out there. I don't know if you guys saw this one, but he was. Do you guys know about the 4B thing that's been going on TikTok?
The 4B?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, there's a funny Tim Pool video about it, but basically it's a kind of thing that's going on TikTok where I think it started in South Korea where there were some high profile cases of violence against women, and so there was a kind of a small group of women that are like, we're swearing off dating and men in general, and it's kind of been adopted on TikTok in the U.S. and Tim Pool has probably the stupidest take on it. If you want to check that out at some point,
I believe that. Let's find that if we can.
Absolute stupidest take. So, but anyway, I just wanted to say I'm having a friend of the show, Francesca Fiorentini, on this week on Thursday, if anybody wants to watch that.
You should. Watch Francesca.
All right, folks, go check out R.M. Brown's show with Francesca Fiorentini. Where can people find that?
I called to do a plug.
Well, I mean, look, you're hustling.
This is why you guys don't get invited places.
Let's... listen, I've done a lot worse things to the physical plant of places that I've visited. So,
oh God, again.
Oh, I'm never gonna let that. That's one of my greatest achievements. Like honestly, in my career now, I think like I said, "Suck on this" to Tom Friedman on air. I got the former governor of New York. God, I can't even remember his name. That Republican. He got so mad at me. That was fun.
It's the Lions guy?
No, no, not Patterson.
Oh.
Before, I can't remember his name. I was the only person on MSNBC the night that Trump bombed Syria, saying we shouldn't do this. And that I went to Tim Pool's new studio and ruined his toilet. Those are some of my career highlights.
Nice. You're basically
That's
an animal.
Great. That is, I hope he's still dealing with that. I hope he's got like a bunch of contractors out there and they're all like, that whole bathroom is like...
They're just like, oh man, this is going to be rough.
You need to go get a part.
Let me...
There's caution tape all around that area of that wing of the compound now.
Yep. Thank you, Jay Tingle. It was Pataki. It was Governor Pataki. I got him so mad at me. All right. Well, appreciate it, RM. We'll put a link to your show in the podcast and YouTube description.
People need to watch RM show.
All right. Later, guys.
Right,
see ya. Bye.
Bye.
Later.
All right. Let's get to Tim Pool, shall we? We'll do one today and maybe one tomorrow. Now, I was on the Tim Pool show for 3 effing hours.
Oh, yeah.
And Tim kept accusing me of prop clipping. Now, I got to be honest, I don't know what prop clipping means.
I don't think he does either.
It's possible he doesn't know.
Because it's a video game thing with glitching. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with, like, searching for things to clip and put online.
I don't get it. But Tim told me as I was leaving, he was immediately looking at his commenters. Or I didn't know this at the time. I had to rush because I had to go back. My mother was dying. And I literally, as soon as I finished, I got a text from my sister saying, you need to call us immediately when you get off the show. And I went an hour longer than I should have. And so I'm getting up and I'm like, thanks, guys. And Tim says, they're mad at me. And I'm like, your staff? And he says, no, my audience, they're mad at me. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why? And he goes, they said I agreed with you too much.
Can I just read the top comment? This felt like 3 hours of Tim trying to convince Sam that he doesn't have an opinion on anything and has never taken any position.
There is. I perused the comments after you were done. I gave it a few days to populate. I don't.
Unanimous.
I probably scrolled for like 5 minutes before I saw one thing that was positive about Tim's performance. I didn't
It's
get
crazy.
that. It was more of his fans yelling at me, but you so thoroughly dismantled him that I think you may have actually done what you set out to do, which is convert some of those fans into thinking a little bit differently.
Well, also with you, they could just revert to misogyny immediately.
Yes. They couldn't do. I mean, I'm a bit of a soy boy.
And there was some
but-
anti-Semitic stuff in the chat.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
without a doubt. But I mean, really, my agenda was to make people who watch Tim realize that he has no ideology, A. B, he does very, very little work and is providing not just opinions that in some instances I disagree with, in some instances I agree with, I guess, but he doesn't do any work to develop those opinions. And one of the things that really shocked me as I'm walking into the studio, I hear some conversation between him and his producer, where his producer is responding to a question of Tim's, which must have been like, have they talked about me or something to that effect? I don't know what, but his producer said 3 weeks ago, they did a video about Social Security, about what you said about Social Security. And then I walked in and I just was really thinking like, holy crap. Like, this guy banned me from his show. The last time I was on with him, he buried the interview. I don't even know if you can find that one I did with him in 2017. I mean, it's buried. He had like 4 different shows and he buried it. He didn't want his audience to see it. And the guy is really, he had you in there and he was complaining about how bad of people we are. I mean, and then for whatever reason, based upon me, he claimed online that I had said that he didn't believe in capital punishment. And this was so offensive, he had to have me back on. And they were also, incidentally, I forgot to mention this, they were advertising on this show before that. Like, not just placing their ads, but addressing the show in the ad. Like, he and this other dude who, I don't know if it was a guest or whatnot, was talking about, and somebody had sent it to us. I had never seen it. So I saw part of it. And I'm like, I don't care. Yeah, invite people over. I would love people to put our shows back to back. I would do the exact same, list of topics and have people be able to contrast and compare. But what really struck me in that moment was, as much as I have said that this guy is lazy, really genuinely uncurious or uninterested in doing any research, I realized as I walked through that door, this guy hasn't even prepared for this.
Amazing.
And I don't I'll tell you, I mean, I think you could see in this thing, I had different clips that I wanted to point to available on my computer. I'm not saying I spent, weeks or months preparing for this.
But we had a conversation about hey, what do you think he might try to throw at you?
I thought about what he might try to throw at me. I wanted to know what, his certain arguments were. I wanted to be able, I want to make money at this, but I don't do this to make money. I do this to affect politics. And I go into these situations presuming That even though his politics may be different than mine, that he's doing the same thing. And it was so apparent to me in that moment that this guy doesn't care at all about that shit. He'll talk about stuff that's easy for him to talk about, like there could be a civil war.
Right.
And like, okay, there could be. There may not be. There might be. What are the percentages? I don't know. I don't need to read anything to know about this. All I need to do is literally skim the headlines, watch some videos on TikTok, and that's it. And I'm fully capable of having that argument about whether there's going to be a civil war for a half an hour. And then, over time, he runs into a story here or there that he finds interesting. Then he memorizes a couple of the bullet points about it and raises it in moments that are not terribly relevant. And there, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Tim Pool Show. I will tell you right now, if you are a listener of Tim Pool's, you can do better. Yes. You can do better.
So much
You
better.
owe it to yourself, regardless of whether you share the same politics that I do or anybody on the show does. You owe it to yourself to understand what it is that you believe. And he is not going to help you do that. He is going to feed you pre-digested gruel that is based upon nothing. If only I would tell you that you shouldn't be watching him and getting your news from him, because if you ever bump into anybody who knows what they're talking about, you're going to feel embarrassed. At the very least, do yourself a favor and double check anything you hear from him. And this moment is, and I'll reiterate this. This moment, this is the Social Security one, right? What I found fascinating about this with Tim Pool in this moment, and why I'm trying to make this argument to if you're a young person, if you're in your teens, in your early 20s or whatnot, you may not care about Social Security. You may not think about it. If you're in your late 20s or 30s or 40s, you may care about it because your parents are probably on it. And for 2/3 of Americans living in their retirement, it keeps them out of poverty. And then that means that their kids, they're not a burden to their kids like they would be, if they were living in poverty. Social Security, the expenditure on Social Security, it can't add to the budget according to law. It has its own financing mechanism. But outside of, and maybe even greater than at this point, the military, certainly when combined with the Medicare and Medicaid, it's the biggest thing on a per dollar basis and probably on a per person basis that the U.S. government does for the past 90 years. And over the course of this conversation with Tim, I realized how little he knows about Social Security, which, your average person doesn't know that much about Social Security, but this guy's been doing this show for years. And B, how he's willing to present an argument without knowing anything about what he's talking about. And when we did that video about him talking about Social Security, it was to me like my birthday and Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and every other holiday rolled up into one, because I could talk about Social Security and talk about how Tim Pool was such an idiot at the same time. And because we were talking about Tim Pool being such an idiot, it got 230,000 views. And every other time I've ever talked about Social Security, which is probably 100, 200, 300 videos or thousands of times over the course of 20 years, if more than 8 people listened to it, I'd be shocked. So here's this exchange versus Social Security.
Well, real quick,
I have to say,
I'll answer your point before you get to Social Security. I do think it's a bit unfair for you to ask me why I think a thing and then get mad that I brought it up.
Well, no,
how could the left do this? Well, here's one way. Why did you even think of something?
You haven't answered that question.
You can ask me about quantum physics and
you just talking
if
about
you can't understand,
blunt violence.
I can't help you.
Yeah, I mean, I think
We can talk about quantum physics and the organization of nature, entropy, and entropy.
No.
But if you don't ask me about those things, you can't get mad that I talk about the things you asked me to talk about.
I understand. I just said I was amazed at the depth in which you do that relative to how much little time you spend on something like just even learning the basics of something like Social Security, which essentially our government does three things. It is a war machine. And then provides Medicare and Social Security. I mean, just on a per dollar basis.
Well, I think it's fair to point out, as pertaining to Social Security, is if I'm going to read The Atlantic and comment on it, criticize me for having unoriginal thoughts. If I'm going to read Forbes and comment on it, criticize me for having unoriginal thoughts.
No, I don't think you should have original thoughts. I mean, the part of this job is not.
No. My point is, your issue with my take on Social Security is just because I read The Atlantic and Forbes that day.
Well,
and they were wrong, I guess. I don't know.
Maybe you misread it, but
I read Forbes saying that insolvency is coming and the system can't sustain itself because on average you need 2.8 to 4 workers to maintain a single recipient.
No.
And I said, well, hold on.
Who did you read? Wait, when you say Forbes, who was the writer?
Oh, pull up the video when we pulled the Forbes out. I want to pull it up.
I mean, one of the things that I think when you brought up all the Dave Rubin videos I do, or we do a lot of videos about you. We got 230,000 views on that Social Security video. And I can tell you, I've talked about Social Security so many times, I've never gotten those type of numbers. But your presentation and lack of awareness about it gave me the opportunity to explain Social Security to 200,000 people that wouldn't do it. But it was stunning. That's the thing.
You talk about me a lot.
Well, I mean, because of, honestly, in instances like that, like I say, no one's going to listen to a dry diatribe about Social Security, but when you come out with such misinformation based upon, I guess you read an article or two that day.
Indeed it is.
And it's literally one of the largest, like 1/3 of our government, at least in terms of dollars, is Social Security. And you read 2 articles that day in Forbes. You don't know by whom or what their perspective was.
Yes, I don't memorize every article I read.
I understand. But you then pontificate and say Social Security is a dumb idea. You don't realize that increase in productivity means that while it may have been, 2 workers for every 1 Social Security person back in the day, or I should say vice versa, 1 worker for every 2 retirees. Now it can be 1 worker for every 4 retirees because of increase in productivity. And Social Security is not going insolvent. There is a trust fund that was established during the Reagan era, and that will last for another 10 years if we don't do anything else. But everything else in this country will go broke.
I'm in complete agreement with you as one of the challenges we face. A lot of people like to attribute to me, and I say this as many times as I can, I just read the news and opine on it. That's really
one of the things that I have criticized you for in the past is that you don't go in depth with the serious stuff and actually learn about this stuff, and you opine about it, which it's but you're not reading it very well because
I'm just reading what the paragraph says. Here's CNBC.
Pause it. I just want to be clear. And what I didn't realize at this point was that's all he read.
You know how
he's looking at Social Security and he's like, I read a paragraph. Why can't I opine upon this? Keeps 2/3 of our Americans out of poverty. It allows you to have both a confidence that your parents are not going to be eating cat food, and that if you reach that old age and you haven't made millions of dollars by telling people basically bullshit on your YouTube channel, that you are also not going to have to eat cat food. This implicates, tens of millions of people now and in the future. And you feel like you can go and say it's the worst idea ever, which is what he said in that video, based upon 1 paragraph you read in a magazine article.
1 paragraph is right because what they put on the screen, notice this, the second paragraph begins with the exact thing that Sam is saying he doesn't understand. So the point is that he's so defensive. I didn't see that lead up, right? Where about how much he reads. You're going to criticize me for reading an article and having an opinion. You didn't even read the article. You read the headline and the subhead and maybe the first paragraph, because exactly what Sam says is right below it, and they show it on the screen.
Because he does a video, and all he's thinking is, I need to stretch this damn thing to 10 minutes, and then we can make about $1,000 worth of ads on it.
Yeah.
I'm just reading what the paragraph says. Here's CNBC. Trust fund reserves used to pay beneficiaries are projected to become insolvent by 2035.
Well, what does that mean?
Only that what comes in is able to go out.
Okay, and so what's the cuts on that?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, what comes in, what goes out. So, like, all right.
Not to increase taxes or increase the worker load.
Right. Not the worker load, but the
amount of
trust,
workers.
What when the trust fund runs out, what will payments be?
I don't know.
Okay. That's a pretty important aspect of this,
Pause it
right?
for 1 second. I just want to say this. I didn't notice that on the screen, that it literally says that figure right after. But go ahead, keep going. Yeah.
83%.
And I got it off
next
by
paragraph.
Go ahead.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, what comes in, what goes out. So, like, all right.
Not to increase taxes or increase the worker load.
Right. Not the worker load, but the
amount of
trust,
workers.
What when the trust fund runs out, what will payments be?
I don't know.
Okay. That's a pretty important aspect of this, right? I mean, this is the incuriosity that you have about
What's incurious about it?
You're not interested in what that means? You know that the trust fund is insolvent in 10 years, but you don't know what the implications of that.
The implications are older people will not have money and younger people have to pay more money.
When you say older people will not have money, how much less?
Well, it depends on what the government decides they're going to allocate.
No. It's already set in stone. There's no allocation.
What is
It's 85% of benefits will be paid out. There'll be a loss of 15% benefits. But it's not necessarily younger people are going to have to pay money.
New workers will have to.
No. They're always going to have to pay, hopefully, with Social Security, unless the Republicans have their ability to cut it. But
Oh, you're right. It actually says 83%. So there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, you were wrong.
Well, I just can't even.
I was off by 2%. You're right. But these numbers, we should say, this is also, we should be clear.
Well, I
there
accept,
are three
I
things in the
accept.
actuarial state. But let me just say this about Social
But I accept your argument. You are correct, and I apologize. I just read the story. I read the news, and I made an assessment about it, as I tend to do.
Yeah, I think you need to, like, on some of these bigger issues, you've clearly gone very deep into the Civil War thing, which we both agree has a very low chance of happening, somewhere above zero.
We don't really talk about Social Security all that often. I think like 3 or 4 times.
It's the most important function of our government.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
We went a bit over.
Let's move on.
Yeah, and here's the thing, like, okay, don't talk about Social Security. But when you did, you basically made it out to be the world's worst idea. I think that may actually be a quote. You said you would cut Social Security. And again, this is such an important aspect of what our government does. And you're just spewing disinformation to people. It's just like, all right, don't ever talk about Social Security. Just talk about civil war that's going. And I have a critique about that. But really, honestly, if you're a Tim Pool watcher, don't you feel like you deserve, at least before you formulate your opinion or accept his, don't you feel like you deserve at least the basic contours of the argument? Don't you feel like you deserve someone who is telling you their opinion and that it's at the very least like vaguely informed by the reality of the whole thing? I mean, I can go very deep into this Social Security thing, and it has to do with wealth inequality. And the reason why those cuts are happening, it has to do a lot with wealth inequality and much bigger issues that impact our country. But the idea that he is spoon feeding you this garbage, and he's not even doing the slightest bit of work about it, to me is just like, I would be upset if I was on the receiving end of that.
He is simulating independent media for you. Both of his justifications, both for the Civil War thing and this Forbes thing, is, well, it was in the mainstream news, so what are you looking at me for? His whole proposition is, we're the independent news,
right.
Come to us, don't go to the media. And Tim Bon Toast mentioned this in his Milquetoast Fence Sitter video on YouTube. Everyone should watch it. Where he's basically a, what do they call it, human centipede of information. And he just, he just proved there. Like, he doesn't even read the next paragraph.
And by that, you mean like it comes in through the mouth and it
Forbes.
just immediately travels through his ass.
And then into Tim's mouth, and then into your mouth.
And then into your mouth.
Yep.
All it has done is it's actually gone from like a, arguable piece of information. And I got news for you.
Toilet talk about Tim Pool. So much shit.
But I got news for you. Forbes also, if you're a Tim Pool watcher, is Forbes really your friend?
Yeah.
Is that like, never mind only one line of a Forbes piece, but even the whole piece of it, because Forbes is writing this stuff for the same reason why Tim is, for the same reason why wealthy elite people who don't want to pay more taxes are doing.
Yep.
They want you to think Social Security is in jeopardy, then it cannot be addressed. And therefore, we're going to have to cut Social Security now so that it's not cut later. And really what it is they want to keep their tax cuts.
Yeah.
They don't want to go back to a regime like existed during the Reagan era or prior to that, or, during Kennedy or during Eisenhower, where wealthy people making $3, $4, $5 million a year or more would actually have to pay those last few dollars mostly in tax. That's just the reality. And that's not necessarily Social Security tax, but because you have so many people hoarding money, and I'm not talking your average saver, I'm talking so few people hoarding so much money, it is not captured by the Social Security tax. And that's why there's this deficit. But again, if you go 3 years out, there's not a single government function, except for Social Security, that has any funding, because the budget is passed every year. So the idea that in 10 years, there's going to be a 15% cut to Social Security is just said to try and convince you that these people who don't have to rely on Social Security, who are not your parents, not your uncles, your aunts, and not you in 50 years, are going to make you swallow cuts to it.
That goes so far beyond the pale. I just can't even.
He just can't even read the next paragraph.
Exactly. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.